I was standing in a parking lot when my father's voice on the phone changed my entire life in less than 1 minute. He told me I had 3 months to leave everything I built in America behind. My career, my independence, the man I was secretly falling in love with, all of it, to marry a stranger he had already chosen for me. I had spent 6 years fighting for this life, working 2 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and now I was being asked to give it all up for a wedding I never asked for. What would you do if the people who loved you most were also the ones asking you to disappear? Stay with me, because what happened next was not the story anyone expected, not even me. I am standing in the parking lot of the grocery store where I work part-time, and my phone is shaking in my hand, not because of the cold, but because I do not know how to hold something that just broke my entire life into 2 pieces. Before this call, and after this call. That is how I will measure time from now on. I can already feel it, the way you feel a bone crack before the pain even arrives. My father's voice is still echoing in my ear, calm, steady, the voice he uses when he has already made a decision and is only informing me, not asking me. Ishita Beta, you need to come home. We have found a good family. The wedding will be arranged within 3 months. 3 months. I am 32 years old, standing in a parking lot in a country that is not mine, holding a phone that suddenly feels heavier than anything I have carried in years, and my father just told me that my life, the one I built with my own 2 hands, working nights, skipping meals, crying quietly in library bathrooms so my roommates would not hear me, all of that is now expected to fold itself into a suitcase and disappear. I want you to understand something before I go any further. This is not a story about a villain father and a victim daughter. It is so much more complicated than that, and if you stay with me, I promise you will feel every layer of it, because I lived every layer of it. Let me take you back. Not to the phone call. Further back. To the life I had before that voice reached across an ocean and pulled the ground out from under me. I came to the United States when I was 26 years old, with 1 suitcase, $400 that my mother had secretly saved from her monthly household budget over almost 2 years, and a student visa that felt like both a golden ticket and a countdown clock. My family is from a mid-sized town outside Lucknow, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where your neighbor's opinion of your daughter's marriage prospects matters almost as much as your own opinion, where a woman past the age of 25 who is still unmarried becomes a topic of concern at every wedding, every festival, every quiet cup of tea between aunties. I was the first person in my family to go abroad for higher education. Not the first to leave India. My uncle had gone to Dubai for work decades ago, but the first to go for a degree, for a purpose beyond earning money to send home. I remember my father standing at the airport, his hand resting on my shoulder, not hugging me, because that is not how we show love in my family. But his eyes were wet, and he said only 1 sentence to me before I walked through security. Do not forget where you come from. I did not understand then how much weight that single sentence would carry years later. My life in America became a rhythm I grew to love, even when it exhausted me completely. Mornings started at 5:30, because my part-time shift at the grocery store began at 6, stocking shelves before the sun came up, my breath visible in the cold storage room where I organized dairy products while half asleep. By 9, I was in class, sitting in the back row of my graduate program in public health, taking notes furiously because English academic language still sometimes moved faster than my brain could translate it. By afternoon, I was in the library, and by evening, I was back at the store for a second shift, because between rent, tuition installments, and the small amount of money I tried to send home every month so my parents would not worry about me, there was no room for rest. I want to be honest with you. There were nights I sat on the floor of my tiny shared apartment, my roommate Mira asleep in the next room, and I cried so quietly that even I was surprised by how silent grief can become when you practice it enough. I missed my mother's hands. I missed the specific smell of rain on dry earth during the first monsoon, a smell that no American city has ever been able to replicate no matter how hard I searched for it. I missed being known, truly known, the way you are only known by people who watched you grow from a child into whoever you are now. But I also found something here that I had never had access to in the same way back home. I found the freedom to fail without an entire community watching. I found professors who told me my questions mattered. I found Mira, who became more sister than roommate, who held my hand the first time I got a B- on an exam, and I thought my world was ending, who taught me that failure in America did not carry the same permanent shame it carried in the town I grew up in. I found Daniel too, though I am not ready to talk about Daniel yet, not because I am hiding him from you, but because explaining Daniel means explaining a part of myself I had buried so deep, I almost forgot it existed. I will tell you about him. Just not yet. What you need to understand right now is that my life in America was not perfect, but it was mine. Every small victory, every A grade, every dollar saved, every English sentence I spoke without translating it first in my head, all of it belonged to me in a way nothing in my life had ever belonged to me before. And then the phone rang on a Tuesday evening, while I was walking back from my shift, the sky already dark, my feet aching inside shoes that had seen better days, and my father's name appeared on the screen. I almost did not answer. I remember that detail so clearly, because some quiet part of me, some instinct I did not fully trust at the time, hesitated for exactly 3 rings before I picked up. Ishita, beta, you need to come home. At first I thought something terrible had happened. My mind raced through every worst possibility: illness, accident, something wrong with my grandmother who had been unwell for months. My chest tightened so fast I had to stop walking and lean against a lamppost. What happened, Papa? Is everyone okay? Everyone is fine, he said. And there was a pause, the kind of pause that tells you the next sentence has been rehearsed. We have found a match for you, a very good family. The boy is an engineer, settled well, respectful family, everything we could ask for. The wedding needs to happen soon, within 3 months, before the good timing passes, according to the pandit. I did not say anything for a long moment. I do not think I could have, even if I wanted to. The cold air felt suddenly sharper against my skin, and I remember staring at a stranger's porch light across the street, watching moths circle it, thinking how strange it was that the world kept moving in small, ordinary ways, while mine had just tilted completely sideways. Papa, I have almost 1 year left in my program. I have a job here. I am building something. Building what, Ishita? His voice was not cruel. I want you to understand that. It was gentle, almost pleading. You are 32 years old. Every year you delay, the good families stop calling. Your mother cries every night thinking about your future. This is not just about you. This is about all of us. Our name in this community depends on this. Our name, our honor. Words I had heard my entire childhood, words that used to feel like a warm blanket of belonging, and now felt like a rope tightening around my chest. I told him I needed time to think, and he said, gently but firmly, that there was no time left to think, that the family of the boy was already expecting an answer within the week. I hung up the phone and stood there in the cold for what felt like an eternity, the parking lot lights flickering above me. My entire future suddenly split into 2 roads I never imagined I would have to choose between. Do I go back and become the daughter my family raised me to be? Or do I stay and become the woman I have only just started discovering? I did not know that night that this decision would test every relationship I had built on both sides of the ocean, that it would force me to confront things about my father, my mother, myself, and yes, about Daniel too, that I was not ready to face. But that night, standing alone in the dark, I only knew one thing for certain. Nothing in my life would ever feel simple again. For 3 days, I did not call my father back. I want to tell you that this was a bold act of rebellion, but the truth is much smaller and much more human than that. I simply did not know what words to use. Every sentence I built in my head collapsed before it reached my mouth, because how do you tell the man who sacrificed his own comfort so you could have a future, that you might choose a different future than the one he imagined for you? Mira noticed something was wrong before I even said a word. She found me sitting on the kitchen floor of our apartment, my back against the cabinet, a cup of tea gone cold beside me, my eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Ishita, what happened? I told her everything. The phone call, the 3 months, the engineer with the respectful family, the wedding timing according to the pandit. As I spoke, I watched her face shift from confusion to something closer to quiet anger, though she tried to hide it out of respect for my culture. A culture she had learned to love almost as much as I did over the 2 years we had lived together. You don't have to go, she said finally, sitting down beside me on the floor, her voice careful, like she was handling something fragile. You don't understand, I said, and I heard the frustration in my own voice. Frustration not at her, but at the impossible weight of trying to explain something that lives in your bones to someone who was raised in a completely different world. This is not just about me saying no. This is about my mother's reputation in our community. This is about my father holding his head up at the temple, at family functions, at his own workplace. If I refuse, it does not just affect me. It affects them for the rest of their lives. Mira was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to hold both truths at once. The truth that this felt deeply unfair to her, and the truth that she genuinely wanted to understand my world instead of judging it. Can I ask you something honest? she said. I nodded. Do you want to go back? And that question sat in the air between us for a long time, because the honest answer was more complicated than yes or no. Part of me, a part I was almost ashamed of, actually did want to go back. Not for the marriage itself, but for the ache of homesickness that had lived quietly under my skin for 6 years, an ache that never fully disappeared no matter how much I built here. I missed my mother's morning prayers drifting through the house. I missed sitting on the roof with my sister during power cuts, counting stars because there was nothing else to do. I missed feeling like I belonged somewhere without having to explain myself. But another part of me, a part that had grown stronger with every exam I passed, every shift I survived, every English word I mastered, that part of me was terrified of losing everything I had built. Because that is what going back for an arranged marriage would mean. Not a visit. Not a compromise. An ending. I called Daniel that night, not because I wanted advice, but because I needed someone who would simply let me talk without trying to fix anything. Daniel and I had met during my second year, in a study group for a statistics course neither of us particularly enjoyed. He was quiet in a way that made space for other people to be loud, and somewhere between shared coffee and late-night library sessions, that quiet space became somewhere I felt safe. We were not officially anything. I want to be honest with you about that, because this is not a simple love story layered on top of a family conflict. It was something softer than a relationship and heavier than a friendship, something neither of us had ever put a name to. Partly because I think we both knew that naming it would force me to confront a question I was not ready to answer. What happens to something like this, when your family has already chosen someone else for you before you were even born? You sound exhausted, Daniel said when he picked up. I am, I admitted. My father wants me to come back for an arranged marriage. There was a pause on his end, not a dramatic one, just the pause of someone absorbing something heavy. How do you feel about that? I don't know, I said. And it was the truest sentence I had spoken in 3 days. Some days I feel angry that he would even ask this of me after everything I've sacrificed to be here. Other days I feel guilty for feeling angry at all, because he has sacrificed so much too. He is not a bad father, Daniel. He believes he is protecting me. In his mind, marriage means security, means family will always be there for me, means I will never be alone in the world the way I sometimes am here. Daniel listened without interrupting. And when I finished, he said something I still think about. I'm not going to tell you what to choose because it's not my life. But I hope whatever you choose it because it's what you actually want, not just what feels safest for everyone else. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small bedroom, replaying every memory of my childhood, trying to find the exact moment where my dreams and my family's expectations had started walking in different directions. I could not find one single moment. It felt more like erosion. Slow and constant, a river shaping a canyon over years without anyone noticing until the gap became impossible to cross without falling. The next morning, I finally called my father back. Papa, I need more time. My program ends in 11 months. Can we not delay the wedding until after I finish? There was a long silence, and then his voice, quieter than before, almost tired. Ishita, the boy's family is not going to wait 11 months. Good families do not stay available forever. And Beta, I am not getting younger. Your mother is not getting younger. Do you know what it does to a father? To attend every wedding in our community and answer the same question every single time. When is Ishita getting married? Do you know how many times I have had to change the subject, make excuses, pretend I am not worried sick about my own daughter's future? His voice cracked slightly on that last sentence, and something in my chest cracked along with it. Papa, I am building a future, a good one. I will have a strong career. I can support myself. I do not need marriage to have security. This is not just about security, he said, his voice rising slightly now, not in anger, but in something closer to desperation. This is about family, Ishita. In America, maybe people believe you can live your whole life alone and call it independence. But who will be there for you when you are 60 years old and sick, and there is no husband, no children, no family beside your bed? Who takes care of you then? Your job. Your degree. I did not have an answer for him, not because he was entirely right, but because some part of what he said touched a fear I had never fully admitted to myself, a fear that lived quietly beneath all my ambition, the fear of building an entire life, and still, somehow, ending up alone. I need to think, Papa. Please, just give me a few more weeks. He agreed reluctantly, but before he hung up, he said one more thing, and it stayed with me for days afterward like a splinter I could not remove. Ishita, I am not asking you to give up your dreams, I am asking you to remember that you also have a responsibility to the people who made those dreams possible. That sentence broke something open in me, because it was not manipulation. It was not cruelty. It was the honest, painful truth of a father who genuinely believed he was protecting his daughter, even as that protection felt like it was slowly suffocating everything she had worked to become. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother started calling too, and her calls were different from my father's. Softer. Full of quiet crying, she tried to hide behind small talk about the weather and neighborhood gossip before finally arriving at the real reason for the call. Ishita, Beta, the boy's mother is a very kind woman. I spoke to her on the phone. She said they will not interfere too much. They will let you continue working if you want, even studying if you want. Mummy, did you ask if I could finish my degree first? There was hesitation, and then a smaller voice. A voice I had not heard from my mother in years. The voice she used when she was scared. Beta, your father is under so much pressure from your uncles. They keep saying, look at Ishita, roaming around in America unmarried at this age. What will people think? I try to defend you. I do. But it is hard, Ishita. It is very hard. I sat with the phone pressed against my ear, tears sliding silently down my face, because in that moment I understood something I had never fully understood before. This was not simply my father against me. This was an entire web of expectations, community pressure, generational fear, and love, tangled so tightly together that it was almost impossible to separate where obligation ended and love began. I promised my mother I would think seriously about it, and I meant it. That same week, everything became more complicated because Daniel finally asked me the question I had been avoiding for 2 years. Ishita, if things were different, if there was no arranged marriage waiting for you back home, would you and I ever have become something real? I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had quietly become one of the most important people in my American life, and I felt the two halves of my world collide in a way I was not prepared for. I don't know, I whispered, and it was, once again, the truest and most terrifying sentence I had spoken in weeks. Because somewhere between missing my mother's prayers and needing Daniel's quiet presence beside me, I realized I was no longer choosing between 2 countries. I was choosing between 2 entirely different versions of myself, and I still had no idea which one I was brave enough to become. 3 weeks passed and I still had no answer for my father, though the silence itself had become its own kind of answer, one that neither side wanted to admit out loud. During those weeks, I threw myself into work and classes with a kind of desperate focus, as if enough exhaustion could postpone the decision waiting for me on the other side of every quiet moment. But grief and fear do not wait politely for a convenient time. They arrive in the middle of grocery shifts, in the space between 2 lecture slides, in the seconds right before sleep takes you. It was during one of those late shifts at the store that I met Kavya, a woman in her early 40s who worked the register beside mine, also originally from India, from Ahmedabad, though she had moved to the United States almost 15 years earlier. I had spoken to her many times before, small conversations about weather, about customers, about the exhaustion of standing for 8 hours straight. But that night, during a quiet stretch with no customers, something in my face must have given me away, because she simply asked, Kaya hua, Beta? You look like you are carrying the whole world on your shoulders. I do not know why, but something about her voice, warm and unhurried, made the words spill out of me before I could stop them. I told her everything. The phone call, the engineer. The 3 months turned into an uncertain, unresolved waiting period. The guilt, the fear, Daniel. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she did something I did not expect. She laughed softly, not at me, but at the familiarity of it all. Beta, I lived this exact story 15 years ago, she said. My father called me, told me he found a boy, a doctor, very respectable family. I was doing my master's here, just like you. I cried for 2 weeks straight. What did you do? She was quiet for a moment, wiping down the counter even though it was already clean, the way people do when they are choosing their next words carefully. I went back, she said. I got married. My chest tightened, waiting for the rest of the story, half expecting her to tell me it destroyed her life, half expecting her to tell me it saved it. It was not what I dreamed of, Ishita. Some days it still is not. But it was also not the tragedy I feared it would be. My husband, he is a good man. Not perfect, but good. We built a life together. Slowly. Here in America, actually. Because after marriage, we moved here together. It is not the story I would have written for myself when I was your age. But it became my story, and I learned to hold both things at once. The grief for the life I did not choose, and the gratitude for the life I did build. I wanted to ask her if she regretted it, but something in her eyes told me the question was more complicated than regret or satisfaction, that real life rarely fits into those two simple boxes. "Do you think I should go back?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Kavya looked at me for a long moment, and then she said something that has stayed with me every single day since. "I cannot tell you what to choose, Beta. Only you know what you can live with and what you cannot. But I will tell you this. Whatever you choose, choose it fully. Do not go back if you are only going to spend your whole life resenting it. And do not stay if you are only going to spend your whole life wondering what you gave up. Either path can be a good life. Only a half-hearted path destroys you." Those words followed me home that night, replaying over and over as I lay in bed, staring at the small crack in my ceiling that I had memorized over the years. The following weekend, Mira convinced me to come with her to a small gathering, nothing extravagant, just a few friends from our program having dinner at someone's apartment. I almost said no. I had said no to almost everything social over the past month, retreating into a kind of protective isolation. But Mira insisted, gently, the way she always did when she knew I needed something, even before I knew it myself. Daniel was there too. We had not spoken much since his question 3 weeks earlier, both of us circling around each other carefully, like two people standing at the edge of something neither of us was ready to fall into. But that night, sitting across from him at a crowded table, listening to him laugh at something one of our classmates said, I felt something I had been trying very hard not to feel. Not just attraction, something deeper, a sense of being fully myself around him, unguarded, unfiltered, without the constant translation between two cultures that I performed almost unconsciously in every other part of my life. Later that night, he walked me home, the two of us falling into a comfortable silence under the streetlights, our breath visible in the cold autumn air. "Have you decided anything?" he asked finally, his voice careful, not pushing, just asking. "No," I admitted. "I talked to a woman at work. She went back for an arranged marriage 15 years ago. She said it was not the tragedy she feared, but it was also not exactly what she dreamed of." Daniel nodded slowly, considering this. "Do you think that would be enough for you? Not a tragedy, but also not exactly what you dreamed of." The question sat heavy in my chest, because I did not have an honest answer. Not yet. "I don't know what enough means anymore," I said quietly. "I used to think I knew exactly what I wanted. A career, independence, a life I built with my own hands, not one arranged for me by other people. But now I keep thinking about my mother's face when she talks about the neighbors gossiping, about my father's voice cracking on the phone, about how much they sacrificed so I could even be here. And I wonder if wanting something for myself makes me selfish." Daniel stopped walking, and I stopped beside him, both of us standing under a streetlight, the quiet street empty except for the distant sound of traffic somewhere beyond the trees. "I don't think wanting a life is selfish, Ishita," he said softly, "but I also don't think I have any right to tell you that. Because I didn't grow up carrying what you're carrying. I grew up in a family where my choices were mostly just my own. I can't fully understand the weight you're describing. I can only tell you what I see, which is a woman who has worked incredibly hard for 6 years, who deserves to choose her own life, whatever that life looks like." I did not respond right away, because something about hearing him say deserves made my throat tighten in a way I was not prepared for. We stood there for a long moment, closer than we had ever stood before, and for one suspended second, I thought he might kiss me, and some desperate, exhausted part of me almost wanted him to. Wanted one uncomplicated moment of choosing something purely for myself. But I stepped back. "I can't," I whispered. "Not until I know what I'm choosing between." He nodded, understanding, though I could see the disappointment he tried carefully to hide, and we finished the walk home in a silence that felt heavier than before, not because we were upset with each other, but because we both understood that whatever this was between us now depended entirely on a decision neither of us could control. 2 days later, everything shifted again, in the way life often does, quietly, through an ordinary phone call that turned extraordinary within seconds. It was my sister, Anjali, calling from India, her voice unusually urgent. "Didi, Papa collapsed yesterday. He is in the hospital." My entire body went cold. "What happened? Is he okay?" "The doctors say it is stress-related. His blood pressure spiked very high. They are keeping him for observation. Didi, he has not been sleeping properly for weeks. Mummy says he keeps talking about you at night, worrying, saying he does not know if he did the right thing pressuring you like this." I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the phone pressed against my ear, guilt crashing over me in waves so strong I could barely breathe. Is he going to be okay? The doctors say he will recover, but Dee, he needs to reduce his stress. And I think part of his stress is you. Not because he is angry with you, because he loves you, and he does not know how to protect you from far away, and he does not know how to let go of what he believes is right for you. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the situation pressing down on me from every direction. My father, the same man who had built his entire identity around protecting his family, was now lying in a hospital bed partly because of the stress of trying to protect me, and I did not know if going back to ease that stress would heal something or simply trade one kind of suffering for another. I thought about Kavya's words, choose it fully, whatever you choose. I thought about Daniel, standing under that streetlight, telling me I deserved to choose my own life. I thought about my mother's trembling voice on the phone weeks earlier, admitting how hard it was to defend me to the relatives. And I thought about my father, lying in a hospital bed thousands of miles away, his heart literally straining under the weight of a decision he believed, with everything in him, would save my life. For the first time since that first phone call weeks ago, I picked up my phone and booked a flight back to India. Not because I had made my final decision, but because I finally understood that I could not make any decision at all without going home first, and facing everything, and everyone, I had been avoiding. The flight back to India felt longer than the 6 years I had spent away from it. I sat by the window for most of the journey, watching clouds shift beneath the plane, my mind replaying every conversation, every argument, every quiet moment of doubt that had led me to this seat, on this flight, heading toward a decision I still had not made. My mother met me at the airport, and the moment I saw her face, older than I remembered, more tired than I remembered, something inside me broke open completely. I dropped my bag and held her, both of us crying in the middle of the crowded arrivals hall, strangers moving around us, none of it mattering in that moment except the fact that I was finally home, in whatever complicated way home still meant to me. Your father is still weak, she said as we drove toward the hospital, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. But Beta, please, do not let him see you upset. His heart cannot handle more stress right now. Walking into that hospital room was one of the hardest things I have ever done. My father looked smaller than I remembered him, the confident, steady man who had raised me now lying in a narrow bed with tubes connected to his arm, his face pale, his eyes tired in a way I had never seen before. Ishita, he whispered when he saw me, and his voice cracked on my name. I sat beside his bed and took his hand, the same hand that had rested on my shoulder at the airport 6 years earlier, telling me not to forget where I came from. Papa, I'm here. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face, and then he said something I did not expect. I am sorry, Beta. Papa, you don't need to apologize. No, I do, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I was lying here for 3 days, thinking about everything. I kept remembering the day you left for America, how excited you were, how scared I was, and I told myself I was protecting you by pushing this marriage. But maybe I was protecting myself instead. Protecting myself from what people say. Protecting myself from feeling like I failed as a father because my daughter chose a different life than the one I expected. Tears slid down my face, and I did not try to stop them. Papa, I love you. I love this family. I love where I come from, but I also love the life I built in America. I don't know how to make both of those things fit together, and I've spent weeks feeling like I have to choose one and lose the other completely. My father squeezed my hand weakly, his eyes glistening. Maybe that is the mistake I made too, he said quietly, thinking it had to be one or the other. Your mother has been telling me this for weeks, and I did not want to listen, because listening meant admitting I was wrong to pressure you the way I did. Over the next several days, while my father recovered, I had long conversations with my mother, my sister, even with some of the aunties whose opinions had haunted me from thousands of miles away for weeks. And slowly, carefully, something began to shift, not in one dramatic moment, but in dozens of small, honest conversations. I learned that my mother had actually been quietly defending me to relatives for months, more than I had ever known, absorbing criticism on my behalf so it would not reach me directly. I learned that my sister Anjali, only 26 years old, had been watching my journey closely, secretly hoping I would choose my own path, because she was terrified of facing the same pressure in a few years, and did not know how to imagine another way of living. And I met the boy, the engineer, whose name was Rohan, at his family's insistence. A meeting I almost refused but ultimately agreed to out of respect for everyone who had worked to arrange it. He was kind, genuinely kind, soft-spoken, nervous in a way that made him feel human rather than a stranger being handed to me like a decision already made. "I know this is complicated for you," he said during our conversation, surprising me with his honesty. "My parents want this marriage very much, but I also do not want to marry someone who feels forced into it. If you do not want this, please tell your family honestly. I would rather understand the truth than build a marriage on something that is not real." His honesty broke something open in me, because it made me realize that this was not simply a story of my dreams against my family's expectations. It was a web of people, all trying to navigate love, duty, fear, and hope in their own complicated ways. None of us fully villains, none of us fully certain we were doing the right thing. That night, I sat with my father on the small balcony of our house, the same balcony where I used to do my homework as a child, the same stars above us that I used to count with my sister during power cuts. "Papa, I want to finish my degree. I want to build my career in America, but I do not want to lose you, or Mummy, or this family in the process." My father was quiet for a long time, staring up at the stars. "Ishita, when you were a little girl, you used to ask me so many questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly south? I used to tell your mother, this child, she will go far, because she is never satisfied with simple answers." He paused, his voice softening. "I forgot that somewhere along the way. I started wanting simple answers for your life, because simple felt safer. But you were never meant for simple, Beta. I think I always knew that. I was just scared of what it meant for our family, for how people would see us." "And now?" I asked quietly. "Now I am an old man lying in hospital beds, learning that love sometimes means loosening your grip, not tightening it," he said, a small, tired smile crossing his face. "Finish your studies. Build your career. If marriage comes into your life in America or India, arranged or chosen, I want it to come because it is right for you, not because I forced it out of fear." I cried again that night, but for the first time in weeks they were not tears of fear or guilt. They were tears of something closer to relief, mixed with grief for the version of this conversation that could have gone so differently. I stayed in India for 3 more weeks, spending time with my family, healing old wounds, having honest conversations I had avoided for years, not just about the marriage, but about expectations, dreams, fear, and love. My father slowly recovered, both physically and, I think, in some quieter emotional way too. My mother and I grew closer than we had been in years, finally speaking honestly instead of performing the roles we thought we were supposed to play. Before I left for the airport to return to America, my father held both my hands at the doorway of our home, the same doorway I had walked through as a child 1,000 times. "Do not forget where you come from," he said again, the same words from 6 years earlier. But this time they felt different, lighter, like a blessing instead of a warning. "I won't, Papa. I promise." When I returned to America, everything felt different, not because my circumstances had changed dramatically, but because something inside me had settled into a place of peace I had not known in months. I finished my degree 8 months later, my parents flying in for my graduation, my father sitting in the audience with tears in his eyes, applauding louder than anyone else in the room. Daniel and I did eventually become something real, slowly, carefully, without the pressure of an ultimatum hanging over us. I introduced him to my parents during their visit, and though it was awkward and complicated in the particular way that blending 2 very different cultures always is, my father shook his hand and said quietly, "Take care of my daughter. She has fought very hard for the life she has built." I am telling you this story not because it wrapped up perfectly, because life rarely does. There are still hard conversations ahead, still cultural differences Daniel and I navigate carefully, still relatives back home who whisper about my unconventional choices. But I learned something during those difficult months that I carry with me every single day. You do not always have to choose between honoring your family and honoring yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept that those 2 things must be enemies, and instead, slowly, patiently, build a bridge between them, even when everyone around you insists the gap is too wide to cross. My father asked me to leave the United States for an arranged marriage. I did not fully say yes, and I did not fully say no. I said something more complicated, more honest, and ultimately more true to who I really am. I said, "Let me show you both worlds can hold me at once."